Our opening words this morning come to us from the Reverend Thandeka. It's called The Legacy of Caring. Despair is my private pain, born from what I have failed to say, failed to do, failed to overcome. Be still, my inner self. Let me rise to you. Let me reach down into your pain and soothe you. I turn to you to renew my life. I turn to the world, the streets of the city, the worn tapestries of brokerage firms, drug dealers, private estates, personal things in the bag lady's cart. Rage and pain in the faces that turn from me, afraid of their own inner worlds. This common world I love anew as the lifeblood of generations who refused to surrender their humanity in an inhumane world courses through my veins. From within this world, my despair is transformed to hope, and I begin anew the legacy of caring. And if you'll get your chalice or your candle or your little electric light, and let's join together in the words of lighting our chalice. We light our flaming chalice to illuminate the world we seek. In the search for truth, may we be just. In the search for justice, may we be loving. And in loving, may we find peace. And it seems appropriate this morning that we would meditate on peace. So I invite you to get comfortable where you are. Relax. And let's take a few of those deep, long, slow breaths. Just find that place of peace within us. Because it's said that peace starts in the human heart, in our hearts. And so I have a couple of questions to meditate on. What does peace mean to you? What is peace for you? What have you done to get peace, even though you might have compromised yourself or taken the wrong stand on something? What would you be willing to do for peace? So I invite us all to sit with those questions for a minute or so. Hmm. Boy, what a month it's been. And here we are again, and it's wartime. The bombs are not falling on Taos or Albuquerque or Chicago or Miami. Our cities are not being reduced to piles of rubble by artillery. And yet bombs are falling and shells are falling and people are fleeing and people are fighting. And our country has taken a side in a conflict on the other side of the world. A conflict in which neutrality seems questionable to us, and one which most observers believe has a side that is clearly in the wrong, a side that is the invading aggressor, committing crimes against the civilian population, both of which are against international law and conventions concerning war. There are few just wars. And war in general has become increasingly destructive and indiscriminate in that destruction. We would seek an end to all wars. And yet human beings continue to war on each other. What's a UU to do? And the answer is, as always, that each of us must decide for ourselves. The right of conscience is enshrined in our belief and our practice. It would be an error to romanticize this conflict as simply one of good versus evil. The motivations of the many sides involved are complicated and unclear among all the rhetoric and the righteousness. So we're called to be as discerning as possible. There have been Unitarians and Universalists who have fought in wars, from the Civil War to the World Wars to Vietnam and onward. And in retrospect, some of those wars were pretty easy to be on the right side of. There are UU ministers who served and still serve as chaplains in all branches of our armed forces. And then there have been those who were conscientious objectors in all those wars, to all those wars, many of whom spent time in prison for their belief in nonviolence and pacifism. All of them are right. They have to be. And they must be if we're to honor our principles. And this can be a hard thing for many people to understand, even UUs, because we cannot dictate how our co-religionists think and act. We cannot shame them or censor them or cast them out. And no democratic vote can force a position of conscience on anyone. And this recognition is at the heart of the statement of conscience on peace, which was adopted at the 2010 General Assembly. It's a short statement. I think it's worth sharing all of its 574 words with you. We believe all people share a moral responsibility to create peace. Mindful of both our rich heritage and our past failures to prevent war, and enriched by our present diversity of experience and perspective, we commit ourselves to a radically inclusive and transformative approach to peace. Our commitment to creating peace calls us to the work of peace building, peacemaking, and peacekeeping. Peace building is the creation and support of institutions and structures that address the roots of conflict, including economic exploitation, political marginalization, the violation of human rights, and a lack of accountability to law. Peacemaking is the negotiation of equitable and sustainable peace agreements, mediation between hostile parties, and post-conflict rebuilding and reconciliation. Peacekeeping is early intervention to prevent war, stop genocide, and monitor ceasefires. Peacekeeping creates the space for diplomatic efforts, humanitarian aid, and nonviolent conflict prevention through the protection of civilians and the disarmament and separation of those involved in violent conflict. We advocate a culture of peace through a transformation of public policies, religious consciousness, and individual lifestyles. And at the heart of this transformation is the readiness to honor the truths of multiple voices from a theology of covenant grounded in love. We all agree that our initial response to conflict should be the use of nonviolent methods. Yet we bear witness to the right of individuals and nations to defend themselves and acknowledge our responsibility to be in solidarity with others encountering aggression. Many of us believe force is sometimes necessary as a last resort, while others of us believe in the consistent practice of nonviolence. We repudiate aggressive and preventative wars, the disproportionate use of force, covert wars, and targeting that includes a high risk to civilians. We support international efforts to curtail the vast world trade in armaments, and we call for nuclear disarmament and the abolition of other weapons of mass destruction. We repudiate unilateral interventions and extended military occupations as dangerous new forms of imperialism. In an interdependent world, true peace requires the cooperation of all nations and peoples. For Unitarian Universalists, the exercise of individual conscience is holy work. Conscientious discernment leads us to engage in the creation of peace in different ways. We affirm a range of individual choices, including military service and conscientious objection, whether to all wars or to particular wars, as fully compatible with Unitarian Universalism. For those among us who make a formal commitment to military service, we will honor their commitment, welcome them home, and offer pastoral support. For those among us who make a formal commitment as conscientious objectors, we will offer documented certification, honor their commitment, and offer pastoral support. Our faith calls us to create peace. Yet we confess that we have not done all we could to prevent the spread of armed conflict throughout the world. At times, we have lacked the courage to speak and act against violence and injustice. At times, we have lacked the creativity to speak and act in constructive ways. At times, we have condemned the violence of others without acknowledging our own complicity in violence. We affirm a responsibility to speak truth to power, especially when unjust power is exercised by our own nation. Too often, we have allowed our disagreements to distract us from all that we can do together. This statement of conscience challenges individual Unitarian Universalists, as well as our congregations and associations, to engage with more depth, persistence, and creativity in the complex task of creating peace. End quote. So we are called to peace, but we ultimately recognize that there are no fixed and final answers to the question of war. I suppose this makes us pragmatists, situations. But whatever labels we might use, and there are usually multiple labels that apply, we're called to continually exercise our consciences. The complexity of the world does not allow us the luxury of absolutes, which is another way of saying that revelation is not sealed. The statement of conscience also reveals that war and peace are not just a matter of the individual. We're part of a nation in an interconnected world of other nations and beings and ecosystems, a world of complex relationships and competing interests. Peace is a systemic goal. War breaks out and gas prices rise at the pump. War breaks out and horrific images flood our media feeds. War breaks out and we are called to make sacrifices of some kind, even if just paying more for gas, which is a sacrifice that honestly seems insulting to those fleeing bombed cities and shattered homes. War breaks out and things we thought were important reveal themselves to be utterly unimportant. Our fashion choices, our social media likes, our celebrity gossip, which car we drive, what phone we have, the list goes on. What seems unimportant to you now? War breaks out, and we are reminded again that an easy, peaceful life is not the rule, but the exception. And that for most of human history, life has been hard and uncertain and filled with violence and conflict. Peace is not our default. Love during peacetime seems easy. Waging peace is a continuous struggle. Can we bring love to waging war? What does it even mean to love in such times? To paraphrase the last sentence of the statement of conscience, I think we are challenged to engage with more depth, persistence, and creativity in the complex task of being at war. Love means to act ethically towards everyone, even though we are in conflict with, even those we are in conflict with. Love looks like the Geneva Conventions. Love looks like the laws governing war. Love looks like taking care of non-combatants, yours and theirs. Love looks like taking care of refugees. Love means defending yourself, your loved ones, and perhaps your country. Love means not demonizing the other side. Love means solidarity against aggression. Sometimes love means physically stopping those who will not stop at violence until defeated. And sometimes war cannot be avoided in the pursuit of peace. I realize this way of using the word love is provocative. But this isn't love as a feeling, but love as the taking of responsibility for the way we show up in whatever situation we find ourselves in, and a demand that others do the same. And this is not an easy task in the best of times, but it's more important in times of war, when it is absolutely necessary that we hold true to our values and our theology. We believe that everyone deserves to be treated with dignity, and that they deserve to live in safety, free from fear of violence. We believe that we are all connected, and we work towards relationships between individuals and nations, relationships of compassion and respect and mutuality. We believe in a just and stable ordering of these relationships based on human agency, freedom, and accountability and cooperation. That is what peace looks like. And when these break down, we have war. And for us, the goal of war, if we must be at war, is not dominion or simply ending conflict by submitting to tyrants, but the restoration of peace based on these values. That restoration begins when the fighting stops. This is what distinguishes us from bullies and tyrants and aggressors of all kinds. I think this is what love during wartime looks like. This is being on the side of love, even if that seems like a weird way to put it. We're called to live by our highest ideals and aspirations as a faith in the hardest of circumstances. Are we perfect at it? Of course not. This task, this commandment, if you will, is filled with ambiguity and uncertainty and failures. But intention matters. Values matter. Ideals matter. Defending values and ideals matter. And love matters, even in the midst of war, and especially in the midst of war. May we rise to the task. May we rise to the task together. Thank you. Maya?
At each service, we have the opportunity to recommit to this congregation. Our offerings are an affirmation. When we give, we say yes to something we value, perhaps to love. May our offerings help each of us practice Unitarian Universalism and empower our mission as a congregation to be an illuminating beacon and an active force in Taos. Since we cannot pass the basket on Zoom, our pledge installments and UCOT Cares contributions should be mailed to Treasurer Joe Mazza at Unitarian Congregation of Taos, Post Office Box 510, Taos, New Mexico 87571, and be sure to indicate whether your check is a pledge installment or a donation for charitable outreach. Now back to Munro for closing words, followed by the postlude benediction and after talk.
Thank you, Maya. Our closing words today come to us from Wendell Berry, an untitled poem that he dedicated to his granddaughters who visited the Holocaust Museum on the day of the burial of Itzhak Rabin on November 6th of 1995. Now you know the worst we humans have to know about ourselves. And I am sorry, for I know you will be afraid. To those of our bodies given without pity to be burned, I know there is no answer but loving one another, even our enemies. And this is hard. But remember, when a man of war becomes a man of peace, he gives a light, divine, though it is also human. When a man of peace is killed by a man of war, he gives a light. You do not have to walk in darkness. If you have the courage for love, you may walk in light. It will be the light of those who have suffered for peace. It will be your light. And now, if you'll join me in the words of extinguishing our chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Thank you, Martha. And now let's reach out our virtual hands across the inner tubes. Hold hands with each other virtually. And the words of our benediction. May love and skill guide our hands.
May love and skill guide our hands.
May love and courage fill our hearts.
May love
May love and
fill
courage
our
fill our
hearts.
hearts.
May love and wisdom light our minds.
May love and
May love and
wisdom
wisdom light our minds.
May love flow through us and walk among us.
May love
May love flow through us and walk among us
As we live our lives
as we live our
We
lives
live our lives
and work for peace in our world.
and work for peace
for
in
peace in
our
our
world.
world.
Amen, amen, shalom, and blessed be. May it be so. Go in peace. Thank you.